You all want to win.
Well, 4 years later, another double would be pulled off by John Force. 1993, Force had never won Indianapolis in any way, shape, or form. He won the Big Bud Shootout, and his Castrol Oldsmobile just thumped him on Monday as well. This actually was the final of the Big Bud, Dave.
And it was the McDonald's Oldsmobile driven by Cruz Pedregon, who was coming off of that great 1992 season where he won the U.S. Nationals and won the Winston Championship, snatching it away from John Force. Was he going to take away the Big Bud Shootout? Not if Force could stop him, and he did, but only by inches, as John Force won the $50,000 bonus payout that came his way as the champion of the Big Bud Shootout. Then came the race that John Force had never won.
And that had been the subject of every TV show open for a half a dozen years. John, why can't you win Indy? It's like Earnhardt in Daytona. Well, I'll tell you, he took no prisoners. He had a single run because Kenji Okazaki could not start his car.
I guess Prudhomme kind of summed it up. I heard him say once, if you can go to Indy and win the funny car race and win the Bud Shootout at the same time, that was an accomplishment only a few have done, and we did it.
Another double was pulled in 1991. Jim White was driving for Roland Leong at the wheel of the Hawaiian Punch Dodge.
This is 1991 when we set the national speed record, then got thrown out for our body being illegal. Then coming back and resetting it again and winning both the Big Bud Shootout and the U.S. Nationals.
Sounds like to me they shouldn't make Roland mad, because look what he did to John Force. A big weekend for Roland and Jim White. A big weekend for this young man. The year 1989. Who is that, Steve?
That is Nicholas Morgan and his happy papa Larry. What a fantastic weekend he had. The Pro Stock Challenge, which is now held in Englishtown in the 80s, the late 80s, was at Indianapolis as part of the U.S. Nationals, kind of like the Big Bud Shootout. And Warren Johnson will long remember the final round of that as well, because he came out on the short end of the stick this day. Larry Morgan was just knocking the tree down with reaction times.
As Morgan got the advantage off the starting line, his Castrol Oldsmobile was able to hold on for a car-length victory. That was the first leg of the double. Then the next day, he didn't have the lane choice. He got moved over to the opposite lane. But the results ended up exactly the same, as Bob Glidden was the opponent that fell to Larry Morgan in this run.
I won the Mr. Gasket Challenge and Indy, and had my first boy the same year, like 2 weeks before Indy, and that's probably one of the best races we ever won. It's a neat place.
For the first double at Kenny Bernstein back in 1983, and this was when Bernstein really started to take command of the funny car class and would go on to win 4 championships. In the Big Bud Shootout final, he was up against Al Segrini, Dave.
And Steve, you can tell the difference in aerodynamics from 1983 to 1990s as Kenny Bernstein in his Ford Tempo car here in the Big Bud Shootout got the win. Now that was the first half of the first ever double at Indianapolis Raceway Park. Dale Armstrong and crew performing as well then as they do today. Now here is Bernstein again. This is one day later at the U.S. Nationals. The final round opponent here, Tommy Anderson.
Yes, the same Tom Anderson that in 1992 and 3 would wrench Al Hoffman to 300-mile-an-hour funny car speeds. He was a driver in 83 and a darn good one. The Alan Aronak and Jim Womack Lincoln Mercury car. Bernstein had his hands full here. Both cars all over the racetrack, but it was Bernstein and the double at Indy.
Of all the places to do that, the U.S. Nationals being what it is, what it meant to me and means to me, and all of us as competitors, it was a great thrill for us to accomplish that. And that's what I remember the most about Indy. It's being the biggest there is, the best.
And little did we know in 1983 that Kenny Bernstein was going to go on to win 4 consecutive Winston Championships. In 1986, with his funny car, he was the first to run over 270, and also the first to use a lock-up clutch. And boy, was Kenny excited about his chances in racing.
Hey, that's it! That's it! Well, I knew it was good. I mean, I knew. I got down here and I was just hollering in there. That's super. Armstrong, man, I'm going to kiss you all over. Yes, sir!
Wasn't long, though, that Kenny Bernstein slid his frame inside of one of those little tubular chassis they call a top fuel dragster.
Actually did that in 1990 and found out the learning curve was pretty stiff, but in 1991, Kenny Bernstein, the Bud King, made the finals against Pat Austin in the Castrol car. Austin Many-time alcohol champion, first time ever in a dragster, and you saw what happened. He just misjudged the burnout a little bit and banged the blower, sending Kenny on a single.
The Austin family had acquired the Castrol GTX dragster from the late Gary Ormsby's estate, and Pat Austin had done such an outstanding job in his debut performance, and until it came down to this disappointing moment, all he could do was sit on the guardrail and watch as Kenny Bernstein came to the starting line. The crewman in the back probably signified the emotion of the moment. They knew they had the race won, and that's all that counts.
You bet. That was Mike Cougar, who's been with Bernstein a long, long time. And then to rub salt into the wound, Pat Austin looked on as Bernstein smokes the tires. He had given it away.
I think that you have a tendency sometimes to treat Indy differently than a regular race, which can get you in trouble also because of what Indy is. The prestige, the mystique of Indy makes you do things maybe sometimes you shouldn't.
We had a lean condition on the burnout and just caused it to backfire, and Kenny went up and smoked the tires, and I just felt like my heart fell out of my chest, and I actually felt that I was at a low point that I've never been to before, and I've never been there since, and I hope to never return there again.
Well, that U.S. Nationals was a low point for a lot of us, especially Lee Beard. Not only the losing crew chief in that Top Fuel final, but he had just suffered the loss of his great friend and team owner, Gary Ormsby, from cancer. We still miss him, always will.
The U.S. Nationals has really been kind of a rocky road for me. A lot of things, a lot of different experiences. The announcement came that my former boss, Gary Ormsby, had passed away, and that particular weekend I was with Pat Austin, and we went to the final round, and that was a very difficult race for me.
Well, my most emotional U.S. Nationals came in 1978, the funny car final, Mac.
As you can hear me in the background calling the race on the PA, Tom McEwen raced his longtime friend and competitor Don Prudhomme, but the emotion really built up to the McEwen side. He had just lost his son.
One of the last things he told me is he wanted me to go there and win the race for him, and so I was kind of on a mission, and it worked out really good. But it was a real emotional deal all weekend, and it's something that you don't forget about stuff like that.
In fact, it was so emotional. Prudhomme, my heavy favorite. When McEwen won, and he did in that Corvette of the near lane, his crew, so ecstatic, they jumped in Don Prudhomme's truck and tried to drive it down to the end of the racetrack. There they were. Absolute bedlam. At the far end of the racetrack, I didn't know if I could do the winner's interview. I had some tears in my eyes.
And there were tears in Don Prudhomme's eyes as well. Talk about emotion. Darrell Gwynn at the wheel at that time of his Coors Extra Gold car. This was 1989. His career definitely on the ascendancy in Top Fuel competition. But as we all know, in 1990, he made that fateful trip to England. The dreadful accident occurred, and Darrell Gwynn returned to the U.S. Nationals, this time at the controls of his wheelchair as Frank Hawley was driving the dragster.
Well, it was a big boost for me to come back to Indy, being a defending champ. And after all, my recovery came from all of my friends, and that's where all my friends were, and that's why I wanted to be there. It was one of the motivating things for me to get on with my life and to get out of the hospital and to just be around the people that I wanted to be around instead of being around, the hospital surroundings.
I will never forget, 11 a.m., Monday morning Labor Day, the roar of the crowd as Darrell Gwynn wheeled out onto that starting line. They were quiet, though, for the Top Fuel final because Darrell's car with Frank Hawley in it made it all the way up against Joe Amato.
This was the finals of the U.S. Nationals in 1990. And as Darrell watched, Hawley was outdistanced by Joe Amato, bringing an end to the dreams of Darrell Gwynn, at least that day. There was a tremendous amount of emotion on the starting line as the crews exchanged congratulations or condolences. Tim Richards, who was at that era the crew chief for Joe Amato, over to chat with Darrell. Darrell headed back to the pits.
Listen in the background. The crowd still cheering Darrell Gwynn. His father, Jerry, his then fiancée, Lisa Hurst, now Mrs. Gwynn. What a fitting way to end the U.S. Nationals. And you know, Mac, a lot of bizarre stuff has happened at Indy. Let's take a look at some of these incidents. How about 1969, when Tom Neha actually, he had the race won against Bill Morgan. I'll let you watch what happened.
A handicap race, and Neha in the 57 Chevy wagon in the near lane, the big wagon on the far side trying to play catch-up. Watch Watch.
But he forgets there's no breakout in the final round. Nails the binders, and around him comes Morgan.
Steve, that is a rule that didn't last very long. The no breakout in the final. Morgan just squeezing by to take the win. Another ironic moment, if you will, came when Don Garlits met Benny Osborne.
Well, he was supposed to meet Benny Osborne, but as the car was slowing down after the burnout, Don Garlits accidentally shut his motor off, and he got a farewell handshake from starter Buster Couch.
And Benny Osborne got the single for the early round win. That was 1969. Let's jump forward 20 years to 1988. Top Fuel final, Joe Amato and Gene Snow.
Gene Snow was in the near lane. He looked in a great position to win his first ever U.S. Nationals in Top Fuel. The man who was the father of the funny car at the U.S. Nationals, backing up, not a care in the world, just trying to get in the right mental frame of mind, concentrate on running his own race, pretend the other guy doesn't exist. All those things Top Fuel drivers tell you they can do and rarely can. The crew made all the necessary cockpit adjustments. Amato staged, Gene Snow staged. Who would be the Nationals champ? Well, were it not for a broken throttle cable, it should have been Gene Snow. That's what happened. The throttle cable fell off of the car. Amato, who had smoked the tires, got back in it and won, much to the delight of his crew.
As we saw a little bit earlier, the dejection on Pat Austin's face when he knew he just gave it away after he exploded the supercharger on the burnout. The same emotions going through Gene Snow's mind as that throttle cable let go. Nothing but raw fuel poured out of the motor. Nothing but smoke came off of Joe Amato's tires. But trust me, when you look in the record book, it has no asterisk beside the win of Joe Amato. The Wave was popular back in those days as well.
Yeah, well, you were in the tower whipping him. It was an embarrassment to the entire sport, Mac. Look at this. Billy Meyer will vaporize a funny car body for you. Unbelievable. And Meyer, who in his youth was a go-kart champion, found that experience highly valuable in this particular situation. Now you think, that car was junk. It couldn't run the rest of the U.S. Nationals. Well, it could if your good friend Kenny Bernstein loaded you a spare body and you grafted it on.
Steve, you and I both have seen numerous explosions of engines, of cars, but I don't ever recall seeing a funny car body disintegrate quite like that one did. And the amount of debris that Billy Meyer drove over, and there was no damage to the chassis. That's why he was able to put the body on and race against this man. That's Joe Pisano. He's out dodging his driver, Mike Dunn, as Billy Meyer came to the starting line with a borrowed Bud body from Kenny Bernstein.
The explosion happened in qualifying, so it was a real tribute to the entire crew that they got this thing together and made it to the finals. And it looked like Meyer was maybe going to win it when just something else went wrong.
And as we saw earlier, Mike Dunn was able to backpedal his way to a win. Meyer launched well off the starting line here in the car in the lane nearest the camera, but he was unable to complete the run as problems set in. Mike Dunn recovered, as every good driver tells you they can do, and drove on for the win.
If you're a younger fan and only know Dick LaHaye from, say, the 93-94 seasons as crew chief for Scott Coletta, let's go back to 1989 when Dick LaHaye as a driver made the final round up against Darrell Gwynn. LaHaye was in the near lane, pumping that brake, kind of like Gene Snow earlier. In fact, in the same lane, I'm going to be the U.S. Nationals winner. Well, maybe not.
Not to tip the hand, but Dick LaHaye broke right at the starting line. 6 volts and held the supercharger fully on, let go, and his car was without power right off the starting line. Darrell Gwynn streaked on for the victory in 1989, and Dick LaHaye fell victim to mechanical problems.
In '89, it looked like I was a shoe-in for a win, and we had 6 little bolts breaking the blower drive right at the step of the throttle, and that was kind of devastating. You know, well, you get so high in you know, trying to win races and so forth, and then you can be so low so quick, and that's part of drag racing.
Well, hot tempers are also part of the U.S. Nationals' emotional extremes. Here in 1981, let's watch Connie Coletta. Watch this build. The engine will not start. Connie is strapped in. He's a prisoner. David Pace is out there backing up from his burnout. Connie wants to race. They're trying to fix the problem. Just kind of watch here. You're going to see a man turn into Mount St. Helens. The seconds ticking away. About this time, Connie realizes, that's it. What an embarrassment.